a month ago, we did a program with Deborah Langsom and Ruth Berman on some of the Star Trek fanzines. And a big part of your activity and your reputations and are involved around the Star Trek, especially the saving of Star Trek. Your most famous write-in campaign. So can you tell us how that got started?
It was his fault.
Okay. In 1966, for the Worldcon in Cleveland, we were running the art show, and Bjo had the futuristic fashion show dumped on her by the Louise
Perrin.
Petty at the time.
Petty.
She married Perrin after that, who used the excuse of acute appendicitis to get out of running it. And she handed Bjo this group of
wadded notes
cards.
And so I'm going to run it. Now, at this convention, some of the committee evidently didn't care for our taking up all the time to do this fashion show. And now what's the difference between having a masquerade and a fashion show? The fashion show is planned.
Curated, as it were.
Curated, all of the costumes and everything. So, and of course, masquerade is just a free-for-all, which is also wonderful. So anyway, I'm trying to get 20 models through their paces.
In the 1 hour, my God, not 1 minute more that she'd been told she had.
And so the same person who told me that shows up a little later and says, we need to put 3 more costumes in your fashion show. And I said, absolutely not. And he said, well, we sort of promised. I said, well, go, I promise. Who is this? And they said, well, he's a big producer. His name is Gene Roddenberry. What are we talking about? You know, I never heard of anyone like that. So I said, no. And after a while, I get this voice behind me, are you Bjo Trimble? I turn around, here's this big Irish mix standing there. And he offers to take me for coffee. Fine, you know, I'm easily bought. And 20 minutes later, he's talked his way into my fashion show. Part of that was that he had hired models who were now looking at losing a job over the holidays. And they offered to help. They offered to, you know, key them, start them, and so on. So there'd be no pauses. And so I accepted. And Gene said the one thing, of course, that the producer says, next time you're in Hollywood, call me, we'll do lunch. Sure. My mother sewed for Warner Brothers for many years. I'm familiar with these kind of people, you know. So we came home and
we're living in Oakland at the time. So we'd get a chance to go down to LA for usually for business reasons, but sometimes just because we had a free weekend. And so Bjo says, let's call him on it. So she called the studio to say, you know, ask for Gene Roddenberry. And his secretary says, Bjo Trimble? And Gene picked up the phone. Turns out he never closed his office door. So we heard what she said, and he picked up the phone and he said, where are you? And we said, we're in LA. And he says, come on over to the studio. So we went over and he let us go on the set and see something being filmed. I don't remember what.
He was thrilled that the fans really liked the show because, of course, all of these so-called Hollywood experts didn't like it and said it would last maybe, you know, 3 episodes, if 6 at the most. And so the fans really loving the show. he was letting them on the set until the legal department found this out and had kittens, and because you weren't supposed to have people on the set all the time. So we kind of achieved a status where,
Well, we knew how to behave on a set too.
yeah,
You know, you avoid making noise, you don't talk, as
And-
long as the lights on saying they're filming.
But so anyway, Gene was predisposed right from the start to like fans and to enjoy their support. That was part and parcel of the whole beginning of the thing.
So at any rate, and it was a very upset. I mean, the people were cheerful, they were friendly. There was a real joie de vivre going on there. And then we were there where they were filming
Deadly Years.
Yeah, Deadly Years. The one where they've caught something on some planet and they're all aging and what have you. And William Shatner did a very brave thing in that filming of that episode. He filmed it without his toupee, which could be a death knell for an actor in those days. And then, so anyway, as usual, Dr. McCoy comes up with a magic potion that, gets rid of this thing and brings back their youth and what have you. So the scene we were watching being filmed was Shatner, Captain Kirk, jumping down off the upper section of the bridge onto the lower one and grabbing his back because it's still creaky from when he was older. He did it over and over and over again. We're not sure if the director really wasn't happy with it or if he was just sticking it to Shatner. We have no idea. It could have been either one of those or both.
I opt for the second one myself. So.
At any rate, every time that they break from part of the action in the filming, the people go back and sit down, and the whole atmosphere was different. It was very down. The joie de vivre was gone. And we thought, what the hell's going on here? So we asked several people what was going on, what had changed, and we weren't getting any answers from anybody. So Bjo brilliantly thought of asking the people at craft services, the people who provide all the snacks and coffee and what have you.
And who also gather all the gossip on the set, on the whole studio. So the guy running craft services said, well, nothing official has come down, but word has come down that the show will end at the end of the second season. And
now, a fact of life in Hollywood in those days was that if a show did not have at least 3 seasons, it wouldn't go into syndication. And it would be just put on the shelf and forgotten. So anyhow, we had to leave. We're driving back up the Central Valley in California before the interstate highway system. So we're slowly making our way up the Central Valley in this Volkswagen Bug that we owned at the time. Of course, no air conditioning, so we got all the windows open, and we're talking about this, and the whole change in tenor and everything like that, and the fact that they were going to cancel it. And I said to her, I should have known better. I said, it's really sad that this show is going to be canceled after a second season. There ought to be something we could do about that. And so we spent the rest of the time on that trip noodling out the idea for a campaign, a letter writing campaign.
No, we had no template. If there was ever a letter writing campaign for a TV show, we've never heard of it. And so we just kind of had to work it out for ourselves. Well, part of that was asking secretaries in various jobs what there was about a letter that made them throw it away or answer it themselves or put it across their boss's desk. And I made up a whole list of do's and don'ts on that, and pared it down to as short a list as I could because people don't read anymore. And we started sending it out.
Now, we sent it out with a letter that said, okay, your job is follow this template, write a letter, copy all of this information and send it to 10 friends and have them each, and tell them to write a letter, copy this information and send it to 10 of their friends.
A chain letter.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it works.
We contacted Tricon and got their mailing list. Big-hearted Howard DeVore set as his mailing list for his book dealership.
And then I finally asked Gene, because I said, don't you have a mailing list of your fan mail? And Gene says, I have no idea what happens to our fan mail. So all studios have their own post office. And I went over to the post office and they had about 40 mail sacks back there that were Star Trek mail. Nobody had opened it. Nobody picked it up. They wanted us to take all of them. Well, we couldn't fit that many sacks into the bug anyway. So we took as many as we could home and started taking addresses off the envelope. We didn't even open the mail at that point. We couldn't do that. We didn't have the time. And so we just took the return address off of everyone and put a return address on their envelope and started from there. It gave us quite a large mailing list. And then mailing, lists came in from everywhere, the fan clubs and
we, as fans will do, we published all of this on our Gestaltner, our manual Gestaltner.
Yeah, and of course, all of the things that we did were on typewriter. We have to keep telling people when we're talking, go look that up. We give talks at conventions about this. We'll say, mimeograph, Google that. We were doing all this on our typewriters, Google that.
So when you, what kind of response did you get back?
Well, interestingly enough, we didn't really get all that much response.
Well, we had fans writing to us.
Fans would write.
And asking for more of the information, what have you. And they talk about, through writing stuff like this, they'd met several people that were also fans of Star Trek. And so we began to get answers from people who were Star Trek fans.
So this was
not a thing from the network, not a peep.
So this was 1966 or 65?
67 into 1968.
Oh, that late. Okay, by then there were fans and doing fanzines and things like that. I assume you enlisted their help.
Oh, yes.
Well, were any particular fans of great help in this and getting the words out, or was this primarily an activity that you were involved with Desilu?
We weren't involved with Desilu. We weren't involved with the studio or the network. What we had was the fans, and all of the local fans, people we'd never met, would show up at our door to help for a weekend worth of getting things
collating and folding and mailing.
And John had to learn this. Of course, they sprang something brand new on us.
Zip codes. So I had to learn how to sort by zip codes and bundle mail and sack by zip codes.
And of course, we had 2 kids. By this time, Catherine had been diagnosed as mentally handicapped and was told, we were told she'd probably never reach more than about 8 years of age. We were also told a big list of things we couldn't do with her, that we couldn't take her to large groups of people. She couldn't handle that, that we couldn't do this, we couldn't do that. And finally, I said, is there anything we can do? And then finally, I got really angry and I said, do any of you experts have a handicapped child? Well, nobody did. I said, well, that makes me the expert, because I have one and I know that we can take her out to groups, we can take her out to conventions. Everybody adopted her.
Somebody said to us at one point, when we went off with a group for something and left Catherine, and I don't think we had Laura yet at this particular point, with Hal Clement. We're,
Dear man.
yeah, and the guy says, Hal Clement's your babysitter? No, he's just minding the kid for a little while, but he loved to come in and help with the art shows.
But I'm here to say that you can just introduce your handicapped child to a group of people and they will love it. I don't know where these experts get the idea you have to cloister yourself as well as
our lifestyle was such that we were going to conventions, we were running the art shows, we were doing, by this time we just, discovered the SCA, and we were doing medieval reenactment things, and we were doing other activities. And we took Catherine to all those because we weren't going to handicap her by leaving her out of all this, with the result that she is just outgoing as hell. and she can be a real pain in the patoot and at the same time delightful. So just like most kids,
like many of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'd like to believe I was a perfect child, but no, you're right.
No, we discovered the SCA while we were living in Oakland. Matter of fact, very shortly after we moved there, 1967.
With being friends of the Andersons, it would have been hard to.
Yeah, well, and we had other fans that they said, hey, we were kind of active with this group that dresses up in costume and has sword fights and things, and you guys do costumes, you could fit right into this. And there's this event happening in a couple of weekends. It was in March. Why don't you come with us? So I think Bjo was wearing her St. Fantony dress.
Well, it was the only long dress I had that looked vaguely medieval.
And I think we put me in something that looked like a monk's thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to...
we dressed the kids up.
Yeah.
And Catherine turned out to really, really enjoy being in costume. And she was in several masquerade parades at conventions as well.
So this was, it turns out, the first official coronation. They decided that they've been doing this often enough that they should consider the winners of the previous tournaments as having been king. And they were going to crown the guy who won the last tournament at this one that we went to. And so this was the first official coronation in the SCA. And we're still friends with the person who was crowned at that event.
Yes.
He rode into it on a horse. I figured for years it was his horse. Found out later it was a borrowed horse. he was standing in the park some distance away from the group, contemplating on whether to ride in on his motorcycle or how he was going to make an entrance. And this lady was riding by and stopped and said, "What's going on over there?" And he says, "Oh, we're explaining the medieval recreation thing." And he says, "And I'm going to be crowned, king at this thing. And I was kind of debating on how I could make an entrance." And she said, "Do you ride?" And he said, "Yeah." And she says, "Here," hops down off her horse and hands him the reins. 1967 in the Bay Area, it's the summer of love.
Well, you brought it right into my next, to the question, which I don't have to ask, but I was going to, this last part of it is, why do you think there was such a crossover between fans and the SCA? Because there was quite a bit, especially in the 60s.
Well, we all, I think, even if we won't admit it, we've got a kind of childhood memory of fairy tales, and it's not a very big step to go from there to medieval reenactment.
Also, Ballantine, both Ace and Ballantine published paperback editions of The Lord of the Rings. And suddenly Tolkien was introduced to a vast audience. And so that was part of it. There was a big Tolkien group, the Lord of the Rings group, fan group in Berkeley. And so that was a chunk of it. Also, it was fun.
That always helps.
Yeah.
You mentioned something in passing I'd like to bring back up. St. Fantony. How did you get knighted? And can you tell people who might not be familiar what the St. Fantony is?
Goodness. Well, it started with a bunch of English fans. And they had started their little group over there, and it was science fiction people, not SCA yet, and they didn't give away very many titles, but Rick Snary had gotten one, and he was a charming early fan we lost him way too early, and then I was
Dave and Ruth Kyle had been
right
living in England, I believe, at the time, and came back with the whole idea and wanted to establish an American division of the Order of St. Fantony. St. Fantony was an entirely made up thing. I mean, it was just,
The problem was that it didn't go anywhere. It didn't do anything. It was just kind of a fun
it was just a thing at Worldcons, and people dress up in costume, as they later did, doing Regency dancing and that spread through fandom as well.
Okay, and how did you guys? Who was it that invited you to participate or become?
Dave
Kyle.
It was the Kyles. Okay. All right. Both of you, plus a lot of fans were involved in the SCA. Much smaller number in something like St. Fantony, but all of these things seem to involve some costuming, and you've been involved in costuming. You even won the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Costume Guild. Besides the mention that you'd made of the fashion show, what was your involvement in costuming?
Well, I made a little of everything, just depending on what was needed at the time. I've always enjoyed designing and coming up with fantasy costumes, some of which we made up, and At one point, I went to the Worldcon masquerade as the green unicorn, and I had red hair down past my waist, and I put that up in a high ponytail, and then
She had created a horse head out of
it was paper sculpture.
yeah, and it essentially, you know, it was down like this, but there wasn't a bottom to the horse head.
No, I had to be able to see.
And
It had a horn.
and a horn, and it had a opening in the back where your ponytail came out. And she also had a ponytail
Attached where ponytails usually are.
yeah.
And the rest of it was a green leotard and tights. And it was a very simple costume, but it won because part of it, I think, was because it was a very simple costume. And that has as much of a chance of winning as the kind where people practically set themselves on fire to make a show.
Did, since you were an artist, did you sketch out a lot of costumes for yourself and for other people?
I did. I still have a lot of them.
The costumes or the sketches?
Not the costume.
Sketches.
The sketches, because with the costumes, basically most of it gets used again.
Mhm.
And, you know, taken apart, and because we didn't have enough money to go out and keep buying yards of trim and yards, you know, this or that and the other thing. So
Since we're talking about costumes, you mentioned the fashion show already. How did that come about? Because that was involved with, if I recall, involved with Galaxy Magazine and some others. Was that your?
the no, not with us. We'd use some of the cover art with the permission of the artists from some of the magazine covers, but that was it. And we had some good models. We had at the time Robert Silverberg's wife and Karen Anderson, who is had a good figure, and several. I wasn't in the shows that often because, frankly, I didn't consider myself having the right figure, and you know. Dara Chavi has my picture of my green unicorn. All right.
Yes, we do have a lot of photos.
Good.
Want to get back to a bit of Star Trek after that. After Star Trek got saved, you were working with Roddenberry on a business relationship.
Yes, but it had nothing to do with our helping to save Star Trek. Afterwards, we also had convinced Gene that fans really, really wanted merchandise.
Mm-hmm.
And so we talked him into letting us put together mail order business for him. Remember, this is all before computers. And because we'd already run two businesses like that, and both of which died simply because we didn't have the money to carry on. But you know, that's the way things work sometimes. But yeah, so we for the first year we answered Trek mail and we sold merchandise. And
it was all stuff that could be mailed flat. So it was things like scripts,
and stickers and various, you know, Grok spot bumper stickers and stuff like that.
Photos and things like that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. In fact, Paramount supplied the photos, black and whites, little 5x7s, and
some 8x10.
And well, some, but not very many. They were not exactly generous with that.
So let's after that, have you had, I know everybody has periods where they're involved in fandom and where they're not. How did science fiction and fandom affect your career working? John had mentioned that he had job switching to when you guys moved north. How did your other careers work with involved with fandom, or did they?
I had no career particularly, and I had up to then done a great deal of graphic art for printing companies, and
That's a career.
there's a career, and also, taking orders. I put out a lot of illustrated a lot of catalogs and things like that, but that was something that I could do basically on the run. With John, his job was a good deal more static, and
I was an inside-outside salesman for a string company, which people get this idea of my standing on a corner measuring out string for people.
Yeah.
No, we sold carloads of the stuff. And during the macrame craze in the later 60s, whole containers of dyed jute and sisal from overseas. So
did that eventually affect, Bjo, did that eventually affect your later career work?
well, I couldn't continue doing freelance work if I'd moved out of the area. But nice thing about freelance work is that you can kind of look around and find something to do.
Well, you did get involved in some fiber work.
I did, and then I found out that I really like natural dyeing, and that kind of thing, and that's another whole world, because these are people who are talking about alpaca wool and this kind of thing. I tried spinning. That isn't my ability to do that. The dyeing, yes, but spinning, no.
well, she spun and wove what's called novelty yarn. That is to say, it's got a lot of lumps in it.
Okay. Edie is the fiber person in the house, so I know nothing about that. We've gone over on all sorts of things. Is there any particular people that you have remained I'm being hesitant here. Any particular people who stick in your mind? You have mentioned people from Burby and Sneery and such. Are there any other people that affected you and you were involved with that you'd like to bring some mention to?
No, not really. Not I think of. I think.
Well, Deborah Langsam is somebody that we remember
Right,
fondly
that's
from.
true.
Matter of fact, I think you roomed with her at the first Star Trek convention in New York.
Yeah, again, I'm still convinced she was the one who got to open the windows. It was freezing cold and snow. People leave snow around on the ground on the East Coast, and
I mean, in Southern California, we segregate our snow. It's up on the mountains where it belongs.
Exactly. So there was this cold breeze coming into the room, and I got up and I closed the windows. A little while later, I wake up, I'm freezing, and someone has opened the damn window. So I go back and I close the window again, and I wake up and it's open again. So we had a few words about this with everybody who was in the room. There were about 6 of us in the room. So anyway, that was Deborah. Well, she would know who else. I don't remember who else. And but yeah.
Well, there are a number of people, including some on watching this, who have some fond memories of some of those early Trek conventions. And what I'm thinking is that maybe we should open this up to some questions from our participants. Is that okay with you?
Yeah, sure.
Sure.
Okay, Edie, can you let people in?
Sure. If you've got a question or you want to make a comment, please type question in the chat. People have been putting anecdotes in, as Joe says, but I haven't seen any questions so far.
Well, I would like to thank the people who are coming in up with comments. So
Yeah, some of those have been pretty good.
Kathy, why don't you unmute and ask your question? Kathy Peck.
We don't bite.
Oh, hello. This is Kathy. I'm sorry. I had to come back to my computer.
I have problems that way too.
I wanted to ask you too, how you feel about Star Trek Discovery. Have you been watching it and do you like it?
We have been watching it and we like it. Well, I'll speak for myself, but I like it. But I wish they had arranged the timing. You know, this is not a original series show. It's after, and having it be a pre one throws the whole time thing off, and it's kind of ridiculous. So that has always irritated me even from the start. The actors are amazing.
Well, the way to justify that is to do what Marvel did and say it's in a different time frame.
Yeah.
Yes,
But it's too easy an excuse. Okay, Paul, you had said something earlier.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know if you recall me at all, John B. Joe, in 1970, which is just yesterday. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Paul, what?
1970, I left home in Eugene, Oregon, and
Yeah.
and landed in San Francisco for a science fiction convention and hoped to kind of settle in there amongst the fandom there, but nobody was willing to take me in, or had room, is the way they politely put it. And so I was sort of distressed and not at loose ends. And you volunteered to let me couch surf for a while in LA. So I went down to Los Angeles and stayed in your living room on your couch for what must have been a terribly long time. It must have been, I must have overstayed my welcome many times. Anyway, I'm grateful for that. I ended up living in an apartment with Tom Digby, which was a very interesting experience for me.
yes.
But I gather he's still around. Anyway, I had a peripheral, I wanted to express my gratitude, by the way, for letting me impose on you like that. I don't know how you could be so generous, but it really was great.
Over the years, we have had dozens of people stay overnight on couches and sometimes on the floor. And it's some of those people have remained good friends over the years. Some of them we just assume not have anything to do with. You're not one of the ones we'd not like to have anything to do with.
I had a kind of peripheral question. One of the characters who was around in your household a lot then was George Barr.
Yeah.
And just yesterday or the day before, I Googled him up and I can't see any evidence that he has left us. There's somebody running a website that sells swag with his artwork on it. And I wondered if you're still in touch with him at all.
No, we got a card from him, Christmas card, some time ago, and we answered that, and he had moved, and
He's
we've never caught up with him. So
well, we did catch up with him on the way to the on the 2001 Con Jose, when we were the fan guests of honor.
Mhm.
We drove up, and we Alicia Austin had been in touch with him and had gotten an address. He's living in Livermore, and in an apartment and working at a pizza place, God help us. And we stopped by and talked long and hard to get him to send some artwork with us to the art show.
Yeah,
And
and we started putting it up on the wall. People were grabbing bid sheets to fill
yeah,
it.
I think we sold just about everything he sent. And
But then he just disappeared to us anyway, and we've never been happy about it.
we've
because-
talked to Alicia a couple times, and she hasn't heard from him in ages. And neither has Tim Kirk, and they were all good friends.
Right. Well, I'll see if I can contact him through this website, georgebar.com or something.
Huh, cool.
We'll look it up.
See if it's being, I think it's being run by a friend. I hope it's a friend.
Yeah, I hope so too.
Yeah. Anyway, I'll get a hold of you and let you know if I contact him.
Please do.
Please do. Thank you.
Okay, and John, you had a comment and question?
Which one of the many Johns?
John Barry.
I didn't really see a need to butt in. I just remember when I arrived at college at Stanford in '67 and visited LA fandom, you put me up and took me around and were very generous and very, very welcoming. And I remember going, you showed me the Bradbury building, the downtown market, and I think it's the same trip, could have been a different one. Took me to a TV set. It wasn't Star Trek, but it was, I think Mark Leonard was acting in something there. So it was fascinating to, you know, I felt like I started to know LA fandom.
Cool.
Yeah. All right.
That was
And it's
probably
really great to see you after all this time.
that Mark Leonard was probably
Here Come the Brides.
yeah, Here Come the Brides.
Could be. Mhm.
Yeah.
It wasn't something I watched, but it was great to
Yeah.
see.
Yeah. So it was a charming little TV show based on the women who went out west
Right.
with the barest promise of marriage, and that was about it. So
And Dara, you had a question about the cookbook.
cookbook.
No,
The Darkover cookbook credits Bjo for her assistance and interest. Marion Zimmer Bradley credited you in that. And I was wondering if you were involved in Darkover fandom as well. I see Deborah Langsam was also credited in there. And
Only peripherally, that we knew Marion Zimmer Bradley and a few people who were in the thing. But at this point, I had two little girls to keep track of, and I had gone back to school to finish my college degree. I've got a BA, that and $10 will get me a cup of coffee. But you know,
Marion Zimmer Bradley, peripherally, just an aside here, is responsible for the name of the medieval group,
Right.
the Society for Creative Anachronism. One of the people in the group was calling to the East Bay Regional Parks people to reserve a park for an event. And they said, "What's the name of your group?" And she put her hand over the thing and said to the room at large, "They want to know the name of our group." and so they doodled around the, and Marion said, well, we're doing sword fighting and dressing up in medieval costume. That's pretty anachronistic given the time we're in. And we're all creative people, so why don't we be the Society for Creative Anachronism? And so that's what she told her, and that's what it's been ever since.
No, because once it gets written down on a piece of paper, that's permanent. That's
Okay, I have a question. I'm going to try to bring you back a number of years. Fandom is quite international now,
Yes.
but you both were involved in a bid early on to go across sort of a Trans-Pacific type group. Can you tell us a bit about the Trans-Pacificon?
Okay, we were bidding for Worldcon for LA, and we were going to call it Trans-Pacificon. And our original thought was to get some fans from New Zealand or Australia to the con this way. And we lost the bid to Oakland. That was the one that went on in 68 and did the whole boondoggle thing we've already talked about. But we were contacted. Roy Tackett had met when he was in the service in Japan. He had met a Japanese science fiction fan who was also a teacher named Takumi Shibano. And
Right.
we got in contact with Takumi. And even though we didn't win the bid, we decided we would try and bring Takumi over for the Worldcon. And we were running a mail order thing to try and get this accomplished. And we were not having a whole lot of luck with that. But we said to Gene Roddenberry at one point, we're trying to hold an auction at the Worldcon in New York in 67 to bring this Japanese fan over to the US for the convention. Could you look around the sets and see if there's some stuff you could send to us for that?
a few items. That's
Yeah.
all we were asking.
So we got to the convention, and one of the committee people said, you need to go down to the mail people or something like that. There's 4 boxes, big boxes of stuff from Paramount for you. So we went down and got these boxes and opened them up and discovered there were lots of stuff.
I mean, he sent real costumes.
Scripts, tribbles. We had no idea what those were because we hadn't seen the Trouble with Tribbles yet. The treatment that he used to sell the show, the Bible that was the thing that said what could and couldn't be put in, and we had asked the committee for some time on the program to run this auction, and they
They were being real jerks.
yeah, they were not being cooperative. So they gave us a time, midnight, in a room, which was down on the basement, the lower level of the hotel. That was kind of a big theater type of thing with a stage. And so we thought, well, what the hell, we'll try this. And we figured it was going to be a real bust. So the appointed time, we're in this room with all the stuff, and the room filled up. every seat was taken. People were sitting on the steps leading down to the stage. People were, it was absolutely amazing.
If the fire department would have shut us down, but
Yeah.
nobody was there at midnight. so
Yeah,
we
the
didn't really
fire
know.
marshal wasn't coming in at midnight, so we were okay. And we started putting things up for auction, and oh my God.
It was amazing.
Yeah.
We had no idea that this was going to be successful, and it really taught us something.
So we, I think that's where the merchandising idea originally came
Yes,
from.
that's where it came from.
We wound up at the end of that with enough money not only to bring Takumi Shibano over to the convention, but his wife too. So
And since Takumi was an asthmatic, that was pretty important that she know how to take care of him. So for the first several days, she only spoke Japanese. And then it turns out that I talked too fast. And poor Takumi would try, and he would, then at the end of it, he would say, I don't understand. So then I'd have to start over again, let's slow down. And finally, I said, I'm doing my best to remember to slow down. And Takumi said, what? And she turned to him and translated in Japanese. And I said, you speak English? And she said, yes. And Takumi's utterly surprised. And he said, why haven't you told me? She said, you never asked. And it turned out that she talked to her children, of course.
who were learning English in school.
And it had just simply never come up between her and her husband. They have an interesting sort of way to live over there. And so it really helped when I could finally talk to her, because it made a lot more sense. And
They stayed with us for about a week before the convention, or a week or 10 days before the convention, and then sometime after the convention, as a matter of fact.
Well, when I met them together, she always still pretty much deferred to him and
yes.
let him take the lead no matter what. But we did get one more question about Star Trek, and it was Kathy, you want to come back on? No, I'll read it for her. If Gene Roddenberry were alive today, how do you think he would feel about how CBS is running Trek today?
I think it would have serious problems with that, because this, while an interesting show, is not entirely Trek. And it
Discovery now.
is Discovery, and it's another whole world. Does that mean I dislike it? No, but it does mean that I have a few problems sometimes with accepting some of the things they throw in. And by the way, I can't fault the values they put in for the CGI and all of that. It's really quite wonderful. But is it Trek? I'm not sure.
I absolutely agree. And by the way, John and Bjo, this is Kathy's husband, Ryan. We met both of you at Treklanta some years ago, and you are a joy to be around. Thank you so much
Thank you.
for fandom. And I would say Discovery is fun science fiction, but it doesn't feel like Star Trek. And you
No.
knowing Gene Roddenberry personally, that's why we wanted to get your viewpoint of how he would react to it.
Well, I think he'd like the thing a little better now that they've introduced Pike, and it feels more like Star Trek with that point.
But the time is all screwed up. It doesn't make sense to make it a prequel.
Yeah, and then we're very much enjoying Picard, and it's taking forever to do another season. And, it's been hard to do that with what's been going on. But we're looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've gone all the way around and come back to Star Trek for that. I think we're getting pretty close to ending our discussion. I want to thank John and Bjo for taking this.